Hey there, ghosties. Welcome to episode 74 of the Ghost Lights podcast. This evening, we sat down with Julie Rada, a woman I've had a great deal of respect for a long time. We've talked about the birth of her love of theater, how it helped her find her voice, her work in the prison system, and how important collaboration and authenticity is to our work and our lives. At this time, I'd like to remind you of the Gunnison Valley Theater Festival, the first of its kind, starting this weekend. They have a film debut, improv with Creed Repertory Theater, plays like Much Ado About Nothing, and Almost Maine. For tickets and information, please visit westerntheatercompany.com/Gunnison-Valley-Theater-Festival. Now, Dan, give us War by the Hypnotic Brass Ensemble. Hey there, ghosties. Welcome to episode 74 of the Ghost Lights podcast. Today's guest, I'm really happy to have this person on. She's amazing. I got a lot of respect for her, and I hope you do too. It's Julie Rada, everybody. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Sam.
How the heck are you? Good to see you.
Yeah. I'm doing great. It's
Nice.
springtime in Denver.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
You got the sun out. It's really my dungeon of a basement apartment actually has some light today, so I feel like spring has indeed sprung.
Yeah, it has. And I'm a warm weather kind of person, and this sure felt like one of the longest winters of my life. So I'm relishing the sunshine and the green leaves and the flowers for sure.
That is a very good description of this last year and a handful of months.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely felt like the White Walkers got here real freaking early and they didn't leave for a long time.
That's good, because on Game of Thrones, it took them years and years. Winter was coming for the longest. It was the longest autumn ever.
Yeah. By the way, what a terrible family motto to just live in that type of anticipation of dread for your entire lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just going to pass this down for generations that you are always like, winter is always, you will never really know joy, because eventually winter is coming and it will destroy that joy.
I'm a bit of an existentialist. I think I have my own version of that.
Yeah. I'm of the same mindset. How have you been doing during the pandemic? What type of things have you done to kind of keep yourself sane as can be?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the travesty of thousands and thousands of people dead and lost jobs and all the sort of calamity that's come with the pandemic, all that aside, I think the pandemic has, for me, given me a gift, some time to, I've been doing theater. We're going to get into this soon, but I've been doing theater pretty hardcore since I was 9 years old, with very few breaks. And I think that this period of time has given me an opportunity to rest and do some integration and to focus on some other aspects of my life, find some balance. And I think I will always feel grateful for that in my life. And yeah, I think it's been a gift to recalibrate a little and shift my relationship with time some. So I have dirt under my fingernails right now. I was just doing some gardening, something I started last summer, and something I've always wanted to do, but I don't have time normally to do that. So, and then I work in the prisons, and we've actually been really fortunate. A lot of that work has continued. It's changed, but a lot of that work has continued. So, in many ways, I haven't stopped working. I also created a piece last July, right in the middle of the pandemic. So maybe my version of rest is not everybody's version of rest, but it's been slower, and I'm grateful for that. I've been reading books for fun and doing crosswords and falling in love. And, I've been keeping myself busy.
That that sounds like you found some really good things to fill with that time. I mean, you hit us with the last one, falling in love. That's pretty fucking awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is pretty fucking awesome.
Huh.
We should all be so fortunate to have it happen at least once in our lives.
Definitely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. The other note that you hit on is reading books for fun. It's yeah, so often for me, like especially before the pandemic, you're grinding all the time,
Yeah.
work, rehearsal. I mean, at least for some of us, and then like the idea of picking up a book outside of the script that I have to get memorized or whatever.
Right.
I'm
Right.
just like
Right.
yeah. So this
Hundreds
is
of
a really
emails a day do not constitute actually a book.
very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Especially now with like I love how I'm about to shit can on Zoom meetings as we're doing this via
Right.
Zoom. But the idea of like doing anything after work on on camera is really
Yeah.
and if you've been staring at a screen all day reading,
Yeah.
like the eyes just don't have the patience for a page. Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. That's true as well.
So you said we'll just jump right into it. Theater since 9 years old in some way, shape, or form. How did it exactly happen to you?
When I was 9,
Hmm.
I grew up in the Phoenix metro area. And when I was 9 years old, my mom signed me up for, I think, a 2 week uh, theater class through the Parks and Rec department
Nice.
in Glendale, Arizona. And it was a melodrama called There's Love and Then There Hills. I had, I believe, one line, but it sort of stole the show. I got to pull out this gun and threaten the villain right at the end.
Nice.
Um, and so I did that summer when I was 9. I had done like a school play here and there, and when I was young, I had a bit of a speech impediment actually, and had gone to some speech therapy, and um, which I'm grateful for. And I think that I had, but for most of my young life, I listened and just absorbed
Mm-hmm.
things, and I was an avid reader from the time I was very young. And I think that there was something about theater that expression was ready to just sort of bubble out of me. And then um, the following summer, my mom, I loved what I had like caught the bug, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was 10 years old, my mom signed me up for a number of summer workshops at a theater called Theater Works. There's multiple Theater Workses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it's like it's a community theater, but with like some equity contracts and such. I mean, it's like semi-professional. And they had a number of youth programming, and I started doing that when I was 10 years old and was cast in their first main stage, in my first main stage play when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just, I think from the time I was 10 to 14, I think the longest period I had off between shows was 2 weeks. I was often overlapping. I remember doing a double header day where I
Oh,
had a matinee and an evening show, and running in on the break in between to a dance rehearsal, do some choreography, and then go back and get my costume, throw some food in my mouth and get back in my costume and get back to the show. So um, yeah, I've been kind of doing it ever since.
mm-hmm.
I have thought a lot about what it meant to me. So, also when I was 10, my parents announced that they were separating and getting a divorce. And um, things weren't great before that happened in the home either.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that period of time was really earth shattering. And I think that the theater, like so many of us, became a surrogate home and community. And I mean, I did fine in school in terms of having friends. It wasn't like, sometimes people are like, oh, well, I was bullied at school, but in the theater, I was home. I don't think it was
Mm-hmm.
quite like that for me, um, but my home didn't feel like a place I wanted to spend much time. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think going to rehearsals and spending all my time there, um, it was where I wanted to be to escape that rough period of time. My parents had a really vicious divorce. They went back and forth to court for
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 years. I mean, it was just went on for forever. And in the meantime, I was joining, singing and dancing groups and just
Mm-hmm.
getting as much training as I could. And then I went to an arts high school. I mean, by the time I was 10 or 11, I was like, my dream is to move to New York City and become an
Mm-hmm.
actor, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Did you feel like were you spearheading a lot of those creative endeavors at during those times of your parents' separation and divorce? Or was that something that was like, we are going to put you in this, you obviously love it, we're just going to put you in this whether
I
we
know it
were
was all me. I mean,
okay.
I was like, here, I filled out the form. All you need to do is sign and give me a check or whatever, that they
Yeah.
needed.
Mm-hmm.
And half the time I was like, I'll figure out how to get a ride or, figure out my own way there. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. There was no doubt. My mom especially was supportive, but she was not a stage mom.
Mm.
She had done ballet as a kid, and my dad's a rock and roll musician. So both of my parents really valued the arts, specifically the performing arts. And
Mm.
I think they understood that I was like, I am unstoppable. And they just kind of let me, to the extent that we could afford it and that
Yeah.
I had the time for it. Well, in sixth grade, I was cast in a show that toured to schools. You know, these touring shows, we've all
Mm-hmm.
done them. Um, but there were, as kids, they cast some kids in it, and I missed the maximum amount of days of school in sixth grade before, I don't know, I would have to repeat or whatever
Uh,
happens to parents whose kids don't go to school.
Before you go to
Um,
truancy court.
yeah,
Yes.
truancy court,
Yeah.
whatever. But I mean, it was like we would do 2 and 3 shows a day. And I was very fortunate because this theater that I worked at really had high professional standards. And um, they expected you to be in the room on time, ready to work, um, leave the bullshit at the door,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we have kind of learned. Um, I was practicing it from a young age
Mm.
and really started caring about where would my career be, when I was 10 and 11 years old, where am I going without, um, without the kind of stage mom, what is that? Tiaras and whatever.
Yeah, the reality TV show about like the
Yeah.
pageant moms.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
nothing like that scene. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like valuing the craft. And interestingly, that theater that I worked at, all of my friends, all of my peers are still working. Philip Dawkins is a good friend of mine. He's a playwright. Catamounts has done one of his shows.
Oh,
A handful of them have worked on Broadway and or done touring shows, and um, we're all still doing it, which I think is
that's
a testament to um, sort of the love and inspiration it instilled in us.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's so unique. You talk about, I mean, being so connected to what your career may be at such a young age. Oh, hey, Mike, my dog is now showing up. Um, Being connected to that thought process as an artist, and it feels like, as you talk about it, like it didn't taint your experience. There still seems like there was a great deal of joy in doing the work. Is that something that you were aware of as you were doing it?
Well, the joy was always primary. It was always about connecting with others and working hard on a shared goal with people I cared about and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully delivering an aesthetic product. Um, yeah, I'm just a type A personality. The idea of career stuff and everything just sort of fell into place along the way. And I also think that that's something that gets, I don't know where I first kind of encountered that ethos in the theater, but that does get really drilled into you. And I'm not even sure that it's that healthy, but that kind of like, if you can do anything else, do that. And, um, you know, 99% of actors are unemployed. You have to be the best. You have to work harder. You have to. I
Yeah.
don't actually even know that that's the theater or the world I want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think then that kind of pressure, self pressure, is becomes part of the identity. And I think in some ways that's what this pandemic and other things, I think culturally we're kind of unpacking and
Mm-hmm.
examining, is this a healthy way to be,
Right.
and to be so career focused and where's my next project, and instead to be a little bit more humanistic, a little slower and connected. And I think at some point along the way, I mean, I did go to New York and I did study acting, and but I think at some point, well, I went to an arts high school, and I think it was in the arts high school that I started getting a lot more interested in the art of it, the and started doing more experimental work. I did a solo show when I was in high school. I started getting interested in Brecht and absurdism, and fundamentally, I started sort of branching off into a different path and wanting to do something that didn't look like Broadway. I mean, I still, just the other day in the car, I was listening to a chorus line in Fiddler on the Roof. Please don't tell all these people that I am a musical theater nerd.
Rubik's Cube, Dan, let's get that cut out.
No. I am, I have much respect and love for Broadway and musical theater, and grew up doing it. And I think somewhere along the way, I got interested in developing a voice that might look or feel a little different than that. And that happened early enough that then I think it's always been about the joy and the creative experiment.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I'm glad that you brought up your voice. It was one of the things that I was excited to have you on for, because I find yours to be a very unique theater perspective. And so, I mean, when you to talk about the human centric aspect of art, how would you define theater? Like, what is your idea? What is theater to you?
Well, I think when I started going into doing theater in prisons, a mentor of mine who is not an artist per se, a man named Alan Gomez in Arizona, he and I were talking about what does it mean to work inside or create inside prisons. And he said, often all we're doing as folks from the outside is creating spaces of possibility. And I've kind of taken that to be one of my sort of life's mission, is to create spaces of possibility. I think it gave language to something I had already been experiencing and feeling. And so I think the theater is about human connection, pan-culturally, across time, across cultures. People have watched while other people moved and made sounds and told stories. And I think it's intrinsic to the human experience, this kind of storytelling, this embodied storytelling. And I think it's a search for meaning. For, why am I here? Why are you here? Why are we here? And it's a space for questioning and a space for possibility. And I say, I do theater to learn how to be a better human being. And I think that's why any of us should do it. And I've seen some people be real assholes in the name of theater, and they say, it's tech week, I'm stressed out, whatever. And I think you're doing it wrong. Like I put being a kinder, more expansive human being above the art. Actually, the art is secondary. The art is and the practice is how I can experience that, practice it, explore it with other people. Yeah, so I actually put the humans first, and then the art second, and then, whatever, a lot of other shit third, fourth, fifth.
Totally. The work in prisons, was there ever a resistance to taking these people on? Did you feel that there was things that would disqualify them from participating?
No. So I've been working in prisons for, this fall will be 8 years.
Wow.
And I've worked with all populations, and including, and this may be, I don't know, this may set me up for a bigger conversation, but including working at facilities for folks convicted of sex offenses, which are, at the bottom of the barrel for for folks in the public as well as inside prison.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
with life sentences because of violent crimes, etc.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think. I think the thing that disqualifies people inside is the same thing that disqualifies people on the outside, which
Mm-hmm.
is like, be a dick and I don't want you in the room.
Yeah.
But if you're there to be collaborative and celebrate one another and,
Mm-hmm.
build each other up, then, and that is, I mean, overwhelmingly what I experience
Yeah.
inside prisons as well, then you're welcome in the room.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's it's really cool that you would say that. I mean, without turning this into a long conversation about me, I'm a product of an absent biological father and then stepfather who's been incarcerated since before I was born for a sex offense and murder.
Wow.
And it's been like it was a long time figuring out the truth. I was in my late 20s when I was like, oh,
Mm,
this is what
mm,
all happened. And then
mm.
even later when I found out exactly how it all happened. And there's definitely a resistance on my part to like have that person back in my life.
Of course.
This is
Yeah.
different from being in a room, learning something to help them be
Yeah.
better people.
Right.
And the fact that this is an active way of what's the rehabilitation in
Mm,
a way
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to I mean I wish Waldo would participate in something like this.
Mm,
I don't believe he's doing so, but I'm glad that there's something like this. I can look to this and say, ah, this is
yeah.
more than just sitting there for 50 years,
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
peace with something.
Yeah. Well, also thanks for sharing that. I mean,
Mm,
incarceration is really stigmatized, even proximity to incarceration. Um, and yeah, also I try to work in such a way that the work shouldn't feel mandatory to anyone inside, which
mm,
means people are opting in.
mm,
So when people want it, are ready for it, then there they are. And folks I've worked with inside really run the gamut. I've worked with people who didn't complete an education past fifth or sixth grade.
mm.
I've worked with people inside with MFAs in sculpture, and I've worked with an orchestra director. I've worked with, I mean, the range is there. People who had, were psychologists before
Mm-hmm.
they were incarcerated, whatever. So the whole range is
You work with Dr.
there.
Lecter?
um,
Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting though, Sam, that you asked. I've thought, just in sort of a hypothetical sense, where are my limits? And,
Mm,
um, when I think about the kinds of folks who are incarcerated at Supermax down in Florence, the
mm,
people who have done some truly, truly atrocious things where, um, multiple victims,
mm,
etc.
mm,
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that pushes up against my own questioning. When I first started doing this work, I it was in Arizona,
mm.
and prisons are always far away. So I had, a 90
Yeah.
minute drive or something to and from.
Mm,
And I would drive back sort of. I just remember driving through the desert, sort of staring and thinking about um, how to reconcile the people I'm experiencing inside the room with things I know that they are incarcerated for. Um, and there's somebody, as a dear friend of mine, I remember driving, because this is how I do my life. I sort of stack one rehearsal right into another,
mm,
driving from the prison where I just facilitated a workshop, directly,
mm.
eating as I walk in the door into a rehearsal for another show. And somebody who worked on that, his father was murdered in a home invasion.
Um,
And just thinking like, oh, like almost feeling sheepish, like I I I'm not condoning anything that people have done. Like,
um,
please, friend, know
mm,
that like your experience matters to me, and I'm not diminishing it. And um, he's always shown me such grace. He believes that he believes like me that art should be accessible to all people, or art
yeah.
can be an opportunity for all
Mm,
people, um, to. explore what it means to be alive.
Mm.
And he's been really supportive of what I do. And I think about people like you, Sam, who have, been either harmed by or the sort of collateral damage of some real harm that people have caused. Um, and I think it demonstrates a lot of grace and capacity to also value the work inside, that it's not this sort of punitive, oh, they should all, whatever, rot. And, um, so, and also you should know I'm happy to listen and talk with you sometime more about this if you want to,
Mm.
because I certainly have grappled a lot. And then I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that there's there are people inside who've made some really terrible choices and had
Mm.
agency about those choices. And we also live in a grossly unjust system that
Mm.
disproportionately criminalizes Black and brown people,
Yes.
etc. And people are sometimes the victims of their zip codes and
Mm.
crushing poverty. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they find themselves wound up in the system when somebody white or from a middle class or wealthy background might not, you
Yeah,
know? So I
absolutely.
hold both of those things to be true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. I
Right.
think one of the keys to what you're doing is, or I should say, not the key, but the thing that keeps echoing in my brain is arts programs getting cut in schools,
Right.
an outlet at an early age.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't necessarily fix the ills or the traumas that someone is living with in their neighborhood or in within their house,
Right.
because we all know a neighborhood could be relatively nice, but inside the walls that you
That's right.
sleep in, it could be terrorizing.
Yeah.
And there the fact that there are so many programs that get cut year after year after year, how
Yeah.
it feels like certain governments just look at those as a waste of money,
Right. Right.
whereas they feel like investing into the prison super industrial complex is
Right.
a good investment,
Right.
at least an investment that won't hurt them in the future.
Right.
It 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 is a, as messed up as the system is, so is the society that perpetuates the system
Well,
and
and
is.
also we live in this sort of scarcity mentality that
Mm.
there's never going to be enough resources, so you have to take from one to give to another. And
Hmm.
I don't believe we have to live in that kind of world. I think that a bigger world is possible, and that if our world wasn't so um, driven by greed and in many ways selfishness, and I mean really at the structural level, I'm talking
Yeah.
corporations um, and sort of labor abuses and things like that, then I think that we might actually find that there's enough resources for positive and abundant schooling, healthcare, ways of alleviating um, crime that don't overly rely on policing, and
Hmm.
a prison system. I think that we could actually dream up a world with enough, but that's not the world we're living in.
No, no, not yet. Anyway,
Not
not
yet.
yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so unique. You were talking about the world of scarcity, or a scarcity mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and how to think about it. For me, I have not traveled much.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out of the country once in my life. I've been to a handful of states, but
Mm.
it took it without making this sound overly poetic, it took theater for me to see that there are other worlds, and
Of
then to
course.
realize that one person's story is actually can be a lot of people's stories, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter whose lens you're telling that story through. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we're talking about representation, which is something that we haven't brought up, but we don't necessarily need to go down this road. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like there's like, just because it's, say, a Native American coming of age story doesn't mean that it's not a relevant coming of age story to all of American, or I should say
Mm.
all of the population that
Mm-hmm.
maybe hold
Mm-hmm.
that movie. And
Right.
like the arts, I feel like, show you that there's no need to have that scarcity mentality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I also think another point embedded in what you're saying, Sam, is that there are ways that this specific story, the small story, is the bigger story, right? And is the
Mm-hmm.
universal. And I think you have to be very tricky with ideas of universal when, especially at a time when we're really conscious of not, because for so long, right, the white cisgender male heterosexual was the default and assumed
Yeah.
to be the universal for everyone, and of
Yeah.
course it's not. But I think to your point, if we had um, an abundance of stories all along, then we could see how the specific story of, in your example, a Native American young person coming of age,
Mm-hmm.
that we could see ourselves inside it kind of regardless of our
Yeah.
background, without taking away from the specificity and the lived experiences that go along with that particular identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to backtrack a little bit, you took your education, and you went off to New York and studied there.
Yeah.
What was that time period like? How did that start to shift your perspective on what you were doing?
Yeah. Theater in New York is a mind fuck. I think anybody who's done it can probably agree. Um, and I mean, I know so many people who move to New York to do theater, and they become really good servers in restaurants and never have time to do theater, or theater makers like myself, people who are doing kind of grassroots work or independent work,
Mhm.
who have all of these ideas and can't rent a space to hold a rehearsal. It's just so exorbitant there. I went to, well, this is probably just not very interesting. I started at Boston. I got a scholarship and went to Emerson College
Okay.
in their acting conservatory program. I left for a variety of reasons after one semester. Um, Fell in love. And my grandmother was dying. She kind of helped raise me. I spent some time with her, and I just worked a lot. My family, actually, I'm a first generation college student, and I didn't really
Mm.
know what to look for in a college. My family didn't really have a lot of funds for it. I just pretended they did and tried to do it anyway and take out a bunch of loans. And yeah, I kind of did college through trial and error, which is
Mm.
not recommended and is very costly and time consuming. I lost I think I lost a year and a half of credits just trying to, I transferred twice. And anyway, I went from Boston, and then where I wanted to be was New York City. I had
Mm-hmm.
a huge poster of New York City on my wall as a kid. Um, and so I moved to New York, and I got into the experimental theater wing at Tisch at NYU. And um, I had already been kind of creating my own work, but the experimental theater wing, really, you are like generating performances or, workshop sharings all the time. And I got
Mm.
exposed to, well, actually, a little bit before this, in high school, actually, I got exposed to the dance theater of Pina Bausch, for example, and like Merce Cunningham and performance artists and Vito Acconci and these really like wackadoo. I read Karen Finley's memoir when I was in high school. These really bizarro performance artists, and um, moved to New York and started doing that kind of work, creating my own pieces. The studio, I loved my studio because the studio windows would only open 6 inches because they had had so many students go out on the ledge of these windows and create performances out on the windows. And they, out of for sheer liability sake, they made it so you couldn't get out on the ledge anymore. And I was learning from people who I still believe are geniuses, and
Mm.
was doing a lot of physical theater work. And um, so I was doing that, and I was in a long-term relationship with a woman, long distance. And then I, I had this sort of crisis one summer where I just felt like New York City felt like a rat race. I was so poor. I mean, like, I would swing by the supermarket when they were getting rid of food so I could have some food. I was living in this dream of a city, and I would go through the Village Voice and circle all the events I couldn't afford to go to, and then just try to find anything free I could go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was still tremendously privileged. I'm not complaining, but it wasn't quite the experience. I would hang out with friends and they would go spend hundreds of dollars on drinks in a bar. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm
Oh.
eating ramen every night, you know? And so and also it felt so superficial. There was so much that in New York City that was like you had to be like tall, skinny, wear all black, bleach your hair, have a certain kind of haircut, you know, get ready for the cattle call. And I was like not interested in doing
Mm,
that anymore. I was feeling like I had a voice. I had something to say,
mm,
even if it felt a little shaky. And I left NYU and I spent a year in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I got a yoga teacher training certificate. I'm technically a certified yoga teacher, and started
fuck yeah.
meditating and studying Buddhism and doing yoga and I made some work up there, and then I went back to New York just a few weeks before September 11th, 2001, and
Mm,
um, I was 21 years old, living in the city, and it, you know, rocked my world like it rocked everybody's fucking world, right?
mhm,
And that was my last semester in New York. And
mm,
but at that time I had already gotten interested in doing prison work. And well, another really big thing happened to me there. Um, I had been I lived in New York when the um, verdict for the Amadou Diallo trial happened. So, Amadou Diallo was a Haitian man who was shot 42 times by four white police officers in the vestibule of his building.
mhm.
Two of the officers reloaded their guns. I mean,
Yeah.
this was my, I was young and I remember Rodney King and the uprising in LA, but I was in New York. The Bronx was on curfew. I mean, riots were happening. Al Sharpton was getting arrested. And I was like, like
Mm,
my world opened up and I started really like, it was like the scales fell from my eyes. I think I had some awareness of injustice, but um, the the police brutality, um, it got me really interested in policing, prisons, incarceration, etc.
mhm,
Meanwhile, the U.S. was ramping up for war in Afghanistan and then Iraq, and
mhm.
it was a political awakening for me. And so that was my final semester in New York, and I heard about the small Buddhist university in Boulder, Colorado,
Oh.
and there was an interdisciplinary studies program there, and my goal was to go there and learn how to do theater in prisons. So I
Mm.
transferred to Naropa um, and ended up getting a psychology degree, which lo and behold is the exact same thing as an acting degree. Um, and so that's what brought me to Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so funny, Britt. That's where I started. I started in psychology. I did
Yeah.
psychology for a full year and it was like, no, there's
Yeah.
nothing for me. And then
Yeah.
here I am, theater degree.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think that the kernel is the same. Like, I'm a dangerously curious human being. I
Mm,
mean, things that you and I are talking about in this conversation, I will probably go away and Google tonight. I mean,
right.
I've, um, I'm insatiable in my curiosity, and I think that the 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 big curiosity is about the human experience. What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to move through this world with this body, and
Hmm.
to that body that grows and flourishes and accumulates wisdom and then decays and what the fuck?
Hmm.
I'm so curious about that, and I think that psychology, theater, and so many other disciplines are a playground for musing on that in so
Yeah.
many different ways.
Can I ask what is your current I guess Facebook status on what it means to be alive? It felt like your meaning of life, I guess, if we were to just like put it into a tweet.
Yeah. Oh God, Sam, you didn't tell me I had to answer that question.
I'm so sorry. I told you, I riff. I'm listening here and I'm trying
Yeah,
to
yeah.
like, oh, ooh.
Um,
Because I can tell you right now, my meaning of life
yeah, you tell
is
me yours and then I'll revise from there.
I was telling a friend today, in fact, I got a dog in October
Mm-hmm.
and I was like,
I remember
oh,
when you posted about that. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, holy shit. I did
Mhm.
not appreciate being a pet owner when I was a
Mhm.
child. I
Mhm.
took it for granted. I took my mom and her work with the dog
Mm.
for granted.
Mhm. Mhm.
And within a week, it was just like, no, this is the best decision I've ever made.
Mhm.
And I gotta like that's it changed my focus on a lot of things. It's I don't know. I mean, maybe it's limited my bandwidth for other things, but it's just
Mm.
like loving this little dude
Mhm.
gives me a lot of purpose. And
Mhm.
through that, I'm finding more patience in my other walks of life because
Mm.
I mean, I don't know, there's just something bigger. I mean, and for
Yeah.
some people that may sound crazy, but I mean, like
Right.
it's it's a nice thing to have in the back of your brain at all times that there's some embodiment of love in your life
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
just kind of walk calmly through that. That's more than a tweet. That's definitely like five tweets right there.
Yeah.
But
Well,
anyway,
those work. They take
yeah,
the images of them
yeah,
and you string them together.
exactly.
Um,
It's a thread. It's a thread.
yeah, thread. Yeah. Yes, I think that's what the kids are calling it these days.
Yeah.
Um, I think that I think that it's so. Sometimes I struggle with the word love because it can
Mm,
sound really passive, and I think love is an action verb, and it's about engagement and participating. But still, I actually think love is the jam, right? Love, it's compassionate action,
mm.
and so I think here's my tweet:
Okay.
um, love hard, learn hard, take risks, then let it all go.
Bam.
I think it's about not being attached to the outcome, right? Is to just be like, I'm going all in, and I'm doing my best to go all in this lifetime with no expectation that it makes a damn bit of difference.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm that existentialist. It doesn't fucking matter.
It's so freeing though. I mean, I love. I
Yeah.
mean, the way I would paraphrase or put that in my own words to say you got to be 100% on something.
Yeah.
It's got to be a fuck yeah, not a okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're gonna make choices in this life, be a fuck yeah about it. The more
Yeah.
often you can do that, I
Right.
think you're gonna have a pretty. You'll look back at the stats on the back of the baseball card and go like, that's a pretty good life right there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and sometimes, and maybe to retract this, I had a conversation with my mom a few years back because I love so many different things and I want to be involved in so many different things and
Mhm.
leave a mark and whatever. And I've done quite a bit of teaching over the last 7 or 8 years. That's been a big part of my life, which is not something I ever thought I would do. I never had an interest in doing. But even when I direct, I try to give people unforgettable experiences of their time in the room and working on the project, something they can really feel proud of, that they can see their own voice in. I just am
Mhm.
always trying to, whatever space I do create, make it the best it can be. And um, I was talking to my mom. We lived together briefly when I was in Utah. I was in Salt Lake City for 2 years at the
Mhm.
University of Utah, and my
Go
mom came and lived
Utes.
with me. The Utes, yeah, yeah. They might need to work on that, but that's another
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it.
um,
You're
but
absolutely right.
what was that?
But it was like, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
um, and my mom, I don't know. I was sharing with her some feedback a student gave about the impact I had had on their trajectory or their life. She said, Julie, that's a really cool thing. You've like left a mark on somebody else's life.
Mm,
And she said, if you can do that for one person, that's a life well lived. And I think I've been fortunate enough to find my way into spaces where something about the time I've spent with other people, they've carried into the rest of their life in a positive way. And like, fuck.
yeah,
That feels like a really, like, my work here is done.
yeah,
Good. Um, if you can just affect one person and improve their life, that's a good feeling.
absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
mean, if you are a fuck yeah about something, there are other people who will see that and in turn
Mm-hmm.
be fuck yeah about it too.
Yeah.
Positive positive energy in one direction is really attractive.
Mm.
And I mean that, like, I mean that in a physical sense. I also mean it in
Right.
like a metaphysical sense.
Right.
To see somebody actively doing something. I mean, you're
Mm.
always there's always going to be haters, and that's
Right.
okay
Right.
because they're
Right.
they haven't found their thing yet. They're going to get there.
Right.
I'm looking at the mic as if it's a hater right now. You'll find your thing. Um,
Eventually, Mike, just
yeah,
stay in the game.
you'll get it. You'll get it. Um, but yeah, it's anyway. I
Yeah.
said what I said. Yeah, it just it pulls people in, and
Mm.
when you're a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
bringing that type of energy, the learning that can happen, that people get out of their way to follow that pursuit. Like, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I hated college so much. It was all lecture based. It always felt
Mm.
lecture based. And it
Mm-hmm.
felt so distant. It never felt like the teacher actually cared anymore. They
Mm.
might have, but I wasn't getting them at a time where they still
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a part of that work.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, we can talk about how it's maybe because they're trying to write a book so they can keep their tenure or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
But anyway,
Mm.
it's when they are passionate, people follow, and then that
Yeah.
they do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This has been a really fun and an inspiring conversation. Before I do a sign off here, I do need to
Yeah.
ask you something important that came up a while
Yeah.
back. You're
Yeah.
talking about ramen. What are your four favorite flavors of ramen?
Oh, I can't eat it
Oh, you
anymore.
can't.
Yeah,
Oh
and I've
no.
also been a vegetarian for a long time, so I always just ate the vegetable ramen. But sometimes I would
Oh.
add, yeah, I have celiac. I can't eat ramen.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah, I mean, I'll eat anything with a rice noodle or something at this
There
point.
you
But
go.
yeah, just the vegetarian stuff. I mean, as a kid, I ate the beef and the chicken and
Oh,
whatever. But um, do you worry we haven't done enough theatery talk? I feel like I've talked about.
oh my God. No, I mean, we can talk. Well, here before we go, I gotta ask you. Duh, I had Brian Freeland on like three
Yeah,
episodes ago.
yeah,
What was your time with Lida? How did that begin? What
yeah.
inspired you to take the reins there?
Oh, well, I mean, Brian and I talked on the phone today. He's a dear
Nice.
friend and a mentor of mine, and truly one of the more visionary people I've ever known. And I think anybody who's listening to this who knows Brian, um, or ever worked with Lita, knows that Brian has a mind like no other. And so, gosh, how did that come to be? I don't have any. I'm not good at concise storytelling.
It's fine. It's perfect for
Yeah,
podcasts.
yeah. So, um, I had seen a few Leader Project shows. I mean, I've been interested in experimental theater, and there wasn't like a whole lot of that going on in the early 2000s. And actually, I auditioned for a show. Um, Iphigenia crash lands falls on the neon shell that was once her heart by Kiradad Fitch, and then I auditioned for another show, which was a gender reversed Taming of the Shrew, and I ended up doing the Shakespeare at the time. And since then, Brian was like, "Oh God, I remember you." I withdrew myself from the casting process for
Mhm.
Iphigenia, and he was like, "Oh, Julie Rada, I wanted to work with you then. Like, you left an impression." And I remember in that audition, I climbed under a chair. I was flipping things over. I mean, I just sort of like I did things you're not supposed to do in auditions, which is probably why Brian liked it. And anyhow, so that happened. And then in, I think it was 2005 or 2006 was the
Mhm.
inaugural season of the Boulder International Fringe Festival. And I was friends with all those kids. I did some really like administrative support and volunteer work to help get it launched.
Nice.
Um, and I entered into the lottery and was um, selected for a performance at the Dairy. I was in the East Theater at the Dairy, and I developed a solo show. I was, I think, 26 at the time, and I was
Mhm.
scared to death. I didn't know how to for myself design a rehearsal process. I broke into the dairy at night to rehearse, and I lived right across the street.
Mhm.
And I broke into Naropa at night to rehearse. And,
Nice.
um, and yeah, I did this hour-long performance. I had a media designer, had video in it, and I had a live musician who was becoming my girlfriend at the time. And
Nice.
she like played drums on my body. And anyway, it was called My Burning Tires. And um, I was fortunate to get a really good production. I'm sorry, promo image,
Mm.
and it got on the cover of the, I don't remember. I think it was the Denver Post's
Wow.
arts and culture section, just my face.
Hmm.
It was just good shot, And so I got good publicity. Brian Freeland came and saw that show. And so he was like a little bit of a super fan at that point of what I was doing. And I was a fan of his. And then there were auditions for Manson Family Values. This was the remount of Family Values. So
Hmm.
um, I wasn't in the original cast. And so I went and auditioned for that, was cast, and it was a tour. So we spent 3 or 4 weeks in London. And then we also did a tour of the southern United States down in Austin and Atlanta. So Brian
Wow.
and I got a lot of time to get to know each other, talk about art, and find any kind of synergy. And um, we were at a small theater in London, and I was like leading the charge to do like a flash mob in Piccadilly to try to get some folks to come out to the show, and
Hmm.
let's go do a weird like art bomb on the tube. And so I was like organizing promotional things, um and just stepped more into like a leadership position among that crew. And then
Hmm.
from there, Brian and I, it was sort of a match made in heaven. I think we really quite adore each other as artists, and developed a friendship from there. And um, as a young woman in the theater, a lot of people don't see you as a director. And I was a director. I wanted to be a director. I was a theater maker, but I was like 26, 27. And I saw friends my age who were men being given opportunities, but not, I have a high pitched voice. I'm small. I'm diminutive, and I had written letters to theaters and said, "Hey, I'm a director. I'd be interested in working with you, maybe as an assistant director." Da, 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 da. And it never went anywhere. But
Hmm.
Brian um, saw me as an artist and as a director, and he multiple times said, I mean, the bindery where we were next to the Mercury Cafe for so long
Hmm.
um, really was my sandbox. And he saw me um, do the work to clean it, hang lights, change the toilet paper, clean the toilet, anything that needed to be done, do the box office. I did it. I painted, I built things, and designed things. And he said, you know, here are the keys, kid. Do something good with it.
Yeah.
And gave me some opportunities. I mean, to have space and um, a producing body to kind of cut my teeth and hold auditions. And I mean, Karen Slack was in the first thing I directed for the Leader Project. And um, there were a number of other incredible artists who intimidated me, and I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, so I wore black every day of rehearsal, and I thought then they'll take me seriously. And to this day I wear all black, at least on day one, because then I think, well, I'll seem formidable. Though I think I care less and less. Beautiful thing about age is sometimes you just sort of like grow into your own sense of authority and decision making. There's less and less to prove. Um,
Absolutely.
but I will forever be grateful for Brian, because I mean, to this day, my website is populated with images of shows that I got to take the helm on. And take some risks on, and I mean, there is no shortage of sweat equity that I put into those myself. Um, but it was a partnership. And I mean, it was like I had my own emerging artist laboratory,
Hmm.
and he believed in me. I will always be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, I think I would. I think the Denver theater community is grateful for that as well.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Oh, you've mentioned the phrase experimental theater a couple of times.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well,
Because I think,
probably.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just
No,
gonna
what does
say,
it mean to you?
what does it mean to me?
Yeah.
Experimental theater, to me, always felt like anything done outside of a quote unquote conventional space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I mean, it could be anything, but like I always felt like if there were seats that were put in there to hold people facing in a specific direction,
Yeah.
if you're doing something outside of that, or if the seats are spaced out randomly assigned, then that's, I guess it's all about chairs. That's my opinion on it.
It might be a little bit more about chairs
Yeah.
than just about chairs.
I'm sure it is.
I think it's a pretty dated term. I
Mm,
mean, I think at this point, it's funny. Brian and I talk about this. Before we had the word for devising, we
mm,
were creating original works, starting with no script with an ensemble. We called it developmental theater, like the idea that we were developing something together.
mm,
And then devising kind of came into the lexicon. And then similarly, I did a piece in, when was that? 2007, 2008. I did a piece that um, only a decade later, or maybe 5 or 6 years later, I decided to start calling immersive. I called it environmental. And Richard Schechner has a book called Environmental Theater. I mean, this is not actually anything new. We have it's hot right now, but it's not actually new. I
mm,
think I mean, depending on how you define immersive or site specific, this shit's been happening for centuries. And um yeah, so how do I define experimental? Um for me, when I am calling something experimental, it means I'm actually walking in with an experiment. I usually am thinking, now, I went to an arts high school. So my science education goes to about eighth grade. Um, and then I went to an arts high school and an arts college and then Buddhist college. So I love science, actually. I appreciate science. I thought I was going to be a scientist as a kid.
mm,
But anyway, scientific process, right? You like start out with a hypothesis and then you set up an experiment in order to test that hypothesis. And you're going to set up um, some givens, and then you're going to put in an X factor or a variable so that you say, I have these 6 things that are assumed, and then the seventh thing is really like, that's the thing we're testing. And I would say that my process of doing experimental work is really like, I'm thinking, I am going to experiment with X. I am interested in how does an audience respond when um, when you shine lights on them?
mm,
Or how does an audience respond when you surround them with bodies of performers, right? And by respond, I don't mean I'm trying to do anything confrontational. I think I'm curious about, like, how does that shift their meaning of the experience? Um, what's the takeaway for an audience? Um, and yeah, usually it's audience specific because
mhm.
audience is what makes theater, right? I've done a lot of really cool things that no one watched. It wasn't theater. And then there's something about having witnesses to
Mhm.
whatever the thing is that shifts it, right? There's
Yeah.
something about being seen or heard that gives you the performativity. So usually the variable has something to do with audience. Like, how do I shift the audience's perspective?
Mm,
Um, if I give them a choice, I did a piece where um, it was a hot wax, a piece in 8 bits, and it was the first piece. It was in 8 little chunks, and the first chunk and the last chunk were set, and the 6 in between were determined. The order was determined by by an audience member coming up and hitting a button on a computer that then would alert the stage manager, who would then shout back to the ensemble, "This is the next scene," and they would all furiously change their clothes and come out for their cue. Um,
oh my
and
God.
I was like, will this work? Will audiences, how long will audiences sit there before they get up off their butts and like make a choice? And which also means I do some unconventional stuff, in the sort of equity world, which again, I have respect for those practices and I can play by those rules. They exist for a reason. But when I'm making my own shit, rules are meant to be broken. Um, because I often am experimenting, the show often isn't totally set at opening night. I'm
Mm.
not going to I'm not going to have my stage manager kill me, from changing too many things or the performers but often if I'm like, I'm curious what happens when I try this, and then you have some test audiences or preview, and then you have opening, and then you really get to know, is it working? Or if I just slightly alter this, or, you know, bring the sound levels down, does the audience then feel more comfortable talking to one another? Or, those kinds of small alterations. It's not like sacrosanct at the time that you open it. There might still be some fiddling around the edges so that you can lean into whatever the experiment is.
Mm. Do you put a lot of time into having test audiences, or do you go like I feel comfortable like as the work that I've done with the Catamounts, I feel like with our immersive stuff, there's like 1 to 2 nights and
Yeah.
then boom.
Listen, Sam, when you're
Yes.
doing experimental theater,
Mm-hmm.
you're lucky to get an audience on opening night. You don't want you don't want
Touche.
to exhaust all your 14 friends who will come all
Yeah.
on your test audience.
Yeah, it's true.
No, normally and that's why sometimes it's hard, because if you're trying to do something that really fundamentally requires large groups,
Mm.
um, you still kind of have to mock it up. I mean, sometimes my test audiences are just a handful of people, but informed people who
Mm.
can imagine how certain things will work and still can give me feedback on the effectiveness of things. But
Yeah.
um, no, I mean, I don't. I listened to some of Brian's conversation with you. I don't think he talked about this, but anybody who listens who's either attended or been part of a Lita show knows we really did have the bar fight equation pretty often, where if the cast can't lose in a bar fight, call the show.
Mm.
um, you always want to be outnumbered by your audience,
Yeah.
and we had some pretty tiny, we'll call them micro performances
Uh,
with the Leader project.
I'm this might get me fired, but it happens it happens in main stage, like quote unquote traditional theaters too. We
Oh,
did
of
the
course.
we did the Catamounts with like, or not the Catamounts. We did the Kentucky Cycle. Sorry, the Kentucky
Mm.
Cycle at Vintage.
Hmm.
Like 22 actors
Yeah.
to a house of 3,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
including my mom.
That's the kicker.
And you're just
When
out
you're
there.
like, hey, can we just cut this and just go to the bar now?
And you should,
Save ourselves a lot of sweat and maybe a
yeah.
load of laundry. Like,
We should probably just go, right? Well, you can't because it's a two-parter.
oh,
Oh.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, of
there's more
course.
people coming at night. And so then like another 3. That's 6.
Uh,
Yay. Oh, this is so great. I can hear them swiping on their phone.
oh, God. I've been there. I
Yeah.
just did this show this last summer. Um, it was in a what am I thinking of? Storefront. So
Hmm.
I was behind glass, and it was a solo show, and everybody was socially distanced outside, and it was a dance movement piece, and it was so interesting who showed up for that piece, and everybody was just outside on the streets, on the sidewalk, which doing that kind of work. Talk about X factors. Anything can happen. People
Yeah.
come by with their music blaring and ruin a moment or whatever. Um, but on the last night, I don't know who some of these audience members were or word got out. And there were some girls who showed up. I mean, this is the middle of the pandemic too, right?
What?
There wasn't a lot to do. There were some girls who showed up, 3 or 4 of them. They brought camp chairs, a few bottles of wine. They sat down right in front of the windows. They were like ready. Like, I'm doing like a weird experimental movement piece about death. I don't know that this is like happy hour fodder, but okay.
Well, that's a perfect pairing with a Pinot Noir out of the
Yeah.
box. I mean,
Yeah, it was definitely like a Chardonnay or something like
oh, okay.
this.
Oh, well then it must have been daytime theater.
Yeah, yeah. I remember doing a piece once where somebody got out some floss. They were in the front row and started to floss. I was like, really? Right now? Good. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
no. That's not the time. Like, I'm
not
glad
the time. Not for your friends next to you. Not for, we can see you,
Yeah.
And yeah, this is not TV. I did dinner theater once in high school, and there's some crazy shit that happens in dinner theater. I did Plaza Suite with Neil Simon's Plaza Suite in high school, and I played anybody who knows that piece. I played Mitzi, the bride who was locked in the bathroom, and I played the secretary in the first act. And I know, my God, dinner theater people who are like not used to, they're not theater audiences that have all of this sort of culture pill training that people get. And it was amazing. I actually loved it. People would be like, girl, get out of that bathroom. You got a husband waiting for you, just screaming at me. Like, meanwhile, there's a whole scene playing out. And just people put their babies up on the stage while they were eating. The meal comes. They took the car seat with their baby and just put it up on the stage. We just walk around the baby. Okay. Sure, why not?
You just picking up the baby as a prop now?
Yeah, or just like move it aside. I have a monologue right here. That's where my special is. I
don't know if these hot lamps are going to be good for the kid. I'm just going to kick them off the edge a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we could all share our war stories. It's not going to get very interesting, but yeah.
When you started talking about dinner theater, I just kept expecting someone to get up on stage to complain about the temperature of their chicken.
Yeah, exactly. I need to send this back. What does that have to do with me?
I am in the middle of a monologue here.
Yeah, I'm acting. I'm doing art.
Hello. Pay attention to me, not the chicken.
Yeah. The dinner is not the point. The theater is.
No. Listen, this is dinner theater. This is not like a 5-star dive.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Audiences, gotta love them. They give you so much to work with. We've done a lot of ghostlight talk. And what I mean by ghostlight talk is like my last question of the podcast. What is the ghostlight you'd leave on for the next generation behind you? That piece of advice that you wish you had before you started.
I think there's something in there about creating a softer space than how a softer, more tender space than how you've had a space with more justice, a space with more listening, and to extend that to yourself as well, and then to others. Yeah. And then all that other shit I said.
No, totally. Julie, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been really, really cool to have you on.
Thanks, Sam. It's been a real pleasure, and what a delightful thing you're doing. And I mean, I know you were doing it before COVID, but what a shining light throughout too. And I'm all about community, and this is one way we can build it, to hear voices from folks around. And Colorado the theater scene is full of really tremendous human beings, warm, friendly, kind people.
Absolutely. I'm lucky they haven't forced me to stop doing this. I'm glad that so many people seem to be keen on it to some extent, so that makes me happy. And I'll keep
good for
doing
you.
Thank you.
Good for you. Good. Congrats to you and Dan both.
Definitely. We'll gush about Dan after we stop recording this. He gets it from me all the time, but I'll say it on the record just so we're clear. I love Dan, and the growth is a lot in part because of that man. Julie, thank you again so much for being a guest. Ghosties, she's Julie Rada. She is awesome. She is unstoppable. Now, Dan, do the damn thing.
Yeah, I love that war by the whatever horn ensemble.
Hypnotic brass ensemble.
Yes. Yeah, I love it.